Hey, beautiful family. Silence. Sometimes I just have to come to an environment that forces me to become silent as well. And especially having children at home, it's never been more true in my whole life as it is now, having a newborn and a 2.5-year-old in the house. But on the topic of children and the benefit of children, because there are so many people in this world today, and we've become so technologically saturated, people are not having children. And for some, it's an okay choice. That's what they decide. But for others, it's not natural. It's an unnatural choice. And I have friends who are not happy, who have chosen to not have children. And they've gotten too old now. And they are not happy. And they'll say that as well. Because you try to fill the natural side of yourself with the unnatural, the entertainment. And again, for some, that's okay. But when you begin to understand the number one cause of depopulation on the whole planet, the reason that the developed nations are having smaller and smaller family units than any other nation is technology. We are receiving technology and we're not receiving the education and discipline to connect to our core self over the technological self. And I think before we go any further, there should be some realization from the current world events where social media and algorithms has created the greatest threat to the stability of democracy in our history. You should be able to see that the algorithms and the technology, really, we are not trained to use it. Our children are not disciplined to use it, trained correctly how to use it. We need to start doing that. We need to start altering our education system to accommodate the technology that we're giving our kids. And when we hand out technology, it should be that we have education systems in place to say, okay, right now, this thing here, this technology in your hand, it's going to do everything in its power to keep you looking at it. And that can make you crazy, as we see in the world today. Some people are just, it's made people so useless at communication. No one's civil. Everyone, I keep seeing people say, if you believe in this, unfriend me. Cancel me, cancel each other. So in a democracy, which we need, democracy, guys, if you travel the world and see some of the other places, we need democracy. And to have a democracy, you need to be able to communicate. And if you're not emotionally and intellectually and disciplined physically enough to have those conversations civilly without losing it and without getting emotional and saying, I don't want to talk to you anymore, then you've got work to do, and you should switch that technology off too. Because if our children were fighting with somebody in a playground and one of them said, I will never speak to my friend ever again because of this differing view that they share today, we would be accosted as the worst parents ever if we got behind our child and said, yep, definitely, you should cancel your friend because of a disagreement. You should not have a civil discourse. You should not try and communicate your point. And above all, you should stay high in your vibratory state. But in the spectrum of emotion, low down emotions of anger and rampage and stuff that you're seeing in capital city at the moment, people outraged, so on. You've got this constant duel between left and right going down. When we go into that state of I'm cancelling the other person because they disagree with me, we actually, for all our actions differ, we come down into that same vibratory space, and we have to avoid it. We must avoid it. And one of the reasons I think we are doing it is actually back to children. Having a child, many people wait their whole life for a child to come to give them permission to love with all they've got. That's what happens to many parents. And the reason they get that permission is they see the child loving them with all they've got, without boundary, without thought and exception, and they feel safe to do it in return. But the problem that I see is that our children will come to us like that, but we're all messed up. Our parents messed us up, our media messed us up, our friends messed us up. And we didn't nurture the heart. We didn't know as a society that we had to nurture one another's hearts to keep one another nice and present and loving. And we didn't do it. And thus our children, for all many wait for this opportunity to have permission to love with all they can, because having your own child kind of does that for many parents. It won't last forever, because the child will be polluted by the parts of you that when you were a child and you loved in that way, the reason you stopped loving in that way are things that your parents and the world did to you. And whatever your parents and the world did to you, you probably aren't even fully aware of those wounds in the education system, the bullying, whatever went on. Those wounds are buried in your inner child. And until you heal those wounds, then giving yourself permission to love with great abound and with as much recklessness and power as you can put into it is very difficult, because quietly the inner child's telling you, don't do that. We all did it once before and it hurt, because we got our hearts broken, we were damaged, because unfortunately the world is full of damaged people who in turn damaged the pure innocence. And that's part of our human nature. We must stop this chaotic spin that we are in and get to a point where we heal the damage and we acknowledge the emotional and the psychological damage that occurs to us through the trauma of people expressing the lower nature. And then when we do that, we will find an opportunity to find discipline in what we are doing, but at the same time we'll find that space where we dare to love without any boundary, just as we did when we were a child, just as our children do to us, just as children do to their own parents do to their own children, because they feel they have permission, safety to do it, because they're not going to get hurt as they were when they were a child. We've got to find all of that. We've got to find all of that if we're going to heal society and ourselves. Because I, at one stage in my life, I could not love in the way that I want to love. And that's because I'd been hurt when I was little, and my inner child is actually a very big part of the adult me. And many of us are not seeing this, that our own inner child is the very thing that's stealing our dreams, because it needs some healing. It needs its wounds covering up, because the world battered you as a child, guaranteed. Your gentle, innocent heart, most of us had wrecked as children. You need to work to fix that. And when you do work to fix that, you find this different state of love. And it's the same type of love you can have for your own biological child, where you get this permission feeling of, I can love you with everything, because I know we're together forever and we might hurt each other, but the boundaries are off. I'm not going to love you in the way that I love a stranger with the same intensity. But what I'm trying to say here is that I believe that love will heal the world. And at the same time, I believe we can all find the same intensity of love that we have for our children in some small way, not as a permanent fixture, but for others who need us. And this is very important, because there are so many children who need men and women on this planet, but there are so many men and women whose inner child needs themselves first, and they don't know it. And they're out here now in Europe, they're out here in America, and they're hurting. They're at home, they're medicating with junk food and alcohol and drugs and addictions and pornography and whatever else they're medicating with, because their inner child has something that it needs to say, but it can't be heard because you've buried it, because last time it was saying it, it hurt. So seek the healing of the inner. The little John in my instance, or the little whomever you are listening to me, is all I want to say. And I find that being a parent, as I am at the moment, I find that feeling of having permission to love without boundary is very, very present. And I just wondered if I can try and use that for the parents out there, or even for those who have not become a parent yet, to say, there's something going on inside our species, and it's a deep-seated level of societal immaturity when it comes to discourse, when it comes to civil discourse, when it comes to politics, when it comes to the direction of society, when it comes to sharing love and caring, when it comes to ignoring children that are suffering, that have names and that feel warm in your arms when you pick them up and they cry on your shoulder, their tears still are wet like your child's, and yet we manage to switch off and ignore them. And I say that's, however unconscious, also deeply, sadly primitive. And I'm not saying that's our fault. I'm saying that that is the fault of injuries and wounds to our soul and our heart as children. We must fix that if we are to fix our society. Big love, guys.